following is an AZPM original production.
Welcome to this latest edition of the Press Room from the radio studios of AZPM. I'm your host, Steve Goldstein. Our distinguished panel of journalists today includes Caitlin Schmidt of Tucson Spotlight, Paul Ingram of the Tucson Sentinel, Sarah Lapidus, report for America for the Arizona Republic, and from AZPM, Christopher Conover. Good to have all of you here today. Let's talk about vice presidential candidate visits, Caitlin. Tim Walz was here in Tucson. How did the event get started? What was the atmosphere like?
I mean, it was hyped up from the start. They had people on hand to hype up the crowd, and they were not really necessary. I would say it was a pretty mixed age crowd. It was clear a lot of people took time off work to be there. Also, a lot of retirees, and they were having a blast together. Dancing before the rally, there were mariachi groups, folklorico dancers. It was indoors, which was lovely, but the campaign was making sure everyone stayed hydrated, and it got started late, but nobody really seemed to mind too much.
Yeah, and Paul, Coach Walz is known for bringing the energy himself. Did he do that?
Oh, yeah, he definitely came in. I mean, he really came in, cheered, threw up his hands, really made sure to shake hands and raise his hands up with one of the people who introduced him. And then he really just delivered a pretty solid, fast speech, put his points out there, and then went through. Since the thing started a little bit late, I think they did a great job in keeping the crowd really entertained and energized. So you had a really big crowd, and they were really kind of excited. I mean, there was one when I actually watched dance for like at least an hour. So yeah, I mean, it was just a fired up crowd, and I think it was really interesting. Yeah, I mean, they did all the things of keeping everybody cool. I have to say, I walked right up to it. Somebody was like, "Here's a cold bottle of water," and I was like, "This is awesome." And then they did a good job of keeping everybody going. I think the addition of the Sunnyside folklorico and mariachi group was a really nice thing. They did a few songs and some dances, and that really kind of kept the crowd going. And then they switched over to pop songs and R&B songs and kept everybody going for a little while.
Sarah, what stood out to you?
And people came from all over. I spoke to two voters. One came from Sahuarita and another bused from North Tucson. So it took her an hour to get to the rally area. But people are very excited and happy to support Walz.
Yeah, Buzz, one of the things that the issues that were brought up are kind of what we're used to seeing at this point. Talked a lot about reproductive freedom, sort of the same messaging, I suppose, that we've been seeing all around the country.
It really was. As we were all talking about around the table even before we started, there were no surprises. If you know the messaging, that's what the messaging you got. But let's face it, in a campaign, that's what you want to keep doing, is hit your message over and over and over and over again and don't come off it. So big success in that way.
Well, and we know that Arizona is a battleground state. I think we're going to add that to the actual name of the state. We just keep hearing that over and over again. But I want to talk a little bit more about the impact of having a Tim Walz visit as opposed to Vice President Harris, who decided to go to Phoenix. Paul, anything significant in terms of where they're positioning people? Does Tim Walz feel like more of a Tucson guy in some way?
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, as one of the other reporters said, Tucson has become the belle of the ball. We were a place that has kind of been a little bit of political backwater. It's just not a place that people go. If they're going to come to Arizona, they come to Phoenix. Maybe they do an event in Tucson, but they're pretty rare. And now we've seen just continuous visits by, headliner politicians who have come to Tucson. And not only have they come to Tucson, but they've also gone to Cochise County. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump both went out to the border in Cochise County. And then, Kamala Harris also, but she didn't go to the same spot. Instead, what she did is she went and visited the town of Douglas. People there were really excited. They said this is the highest profile visitor they've ever had. So they were really excited to see somebody come to their town and really visit and talk about their particular issues. And so she used that as an opportunity to talk about the border, but also talked about other issues that were important to people too.
Yeah, I can't think of a time in the 20 years that I've been here that a candidate has been to a town in Cochise County. Many of them go to the border. We've seen that, but never when they announced that Harris was going to Douglas. I thought, wow, I can't remember ever seeing that, going to somewhere like Douglas, which is not a big metropolis by anybody's stretch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One other thing I wanted to ask about, maybe Sarah, you could talk about this a little bit. Some local dignitaries came to the Walz event, and Mayor Romero was there, Is that significant to show sort of the bond that perhaps this particular ticket has with local officials in what is mostly a left of center area?
Definitely. And also the Pima County Recorder was there as well. And Mayor Romero has been very outspoken in her support. She was also at the Doug Emhoff's visit. So she's been very vocal about the importance of Tucson in this election.
Caitlin, are these folks who could be, I'm getting ahead of the game, roles in an administration at some point?
I mean, I don't think Mayor Romero is long for Tucson anymore. I think she has her eye on the prize. She's been making headlines across the country for years, especially during the pandemic. I don't think she'll be sticking around for long. What else was interesting, I thought, was they really did a good job of bringing in folks to connect with young people. We had a celebrity endorser, Jaime Camille from Jane the Virgin was there. The crowd loved that. The Southern Arizona lead for the Harris Walz campaign is Tucson and Patrick Robles, who people here are very familiar with him. He's worked his way up from the county attorney's office to the governor's office. So, and he's 25 years old, 23 maybe. So they're being really cognizant, I think, of that messaging.
I'm thinking from a political point of view, the folks who tend to come to rallies are those who are obviously very excited about seeing this person. So is it about creating a scene or, to coin a phrase, a buzz to really get people excited? Or is it a situation where they know it's really not going to change any votes, but it might get people more excited about the get out the vote effort?
I mean, I think one thing is clear is both Vance and Walz, who were both here yesterday, really set their this as being a get out the vote campaign. It was really, one thing that J.D. Vance said is he said sort of jokingly, we should vote 10 times. And of course he said, he was joking, but what he said was, I want you to go and vote, but I also want you to get other people to go vote. And Walz said the same thing, although he said, you should go and get 5 people to vote. So the sense is that both campaigns are not only saying, hey, we're here, but they're trying to get their supporters, their central supporters, this really kind of hot core, people who are really engaged with the campaigns, to also go out and find other people, their neighbors, their friends, family members, to also make sure to go vote. So they're really trying to convince that. And that's really important. I mean, ballots dropped. So early ballots are in the mail or already arrived. And, it's time for people to start actually going through the vote. And then, of course, then we have Tuesday, November 5th, and people have to also, that's a time for people to really, that's the last chance. That's time to go vote and see who we're going to choose. One thing, too, is that we have to remember that, of course, we're spending a lot of time thinking about the national campaigns, but we also have state-level campaigns, we also have local campaigns, and we have a ton of propositions that people are going to vote for. As multiple people have said, the new ballot is going to be 4 pages. It's long. There's a lot of stuff on there. So really making sure that people are engaged, that people understand what they should vote for, and especially for people with early ballots, they have a little bit of time to kind of go through those propositions and think about what those mean and decide what they want to vote for.
Well, and Paul, I think you hit on it because early ballots are out. Mm-hmm. Voting is underway in Arizona. Election month has begun as opposed to election day. Mm-hmm. So I think we're also starting to hear, and Walz and Vance both hit on it, a change in the message. Go vote. We saw Carrie Lake go and vote earlier this week. And of course, as politicians do, she had media trailing behind her as she went and cast a ballot. I believe Adrian Fontes, the Secretary of State, has already cast his ballot. Same media trailing behind him. So the message is now starting to change in Arizona. Go vote or fill out the ballot at your kitchen table and get it back in the mail. So we're starting to see that shift here.
But Chris, there was also a shift, though, in J.D. Vance talking about that, because for a while, even though former President Trump did do early voting himself, he talked it down, saying that was somehow bad for Republicans. So that's a change of message there.
It is a change of message. I remember, and it seems so long ago, then Governor Doug Ducey sitting with then President Trump in the White House, and President Trump was disparaging mail-in voting, and Governor Ducey to Trump's face said, oh no, we've done this for decades. It's good in Arizona. And Arizona has done mail-in voting for absolute decades. Yeah. So we've kind of got it figured out.
Yeah. Sarah, not to give us whiplash on this, but one more thing about specifically what J.D. Vance and Tim Walz had to say. Though a vice presidential debate has, let's say, untruths on both sides, that always seems to happen, their civil tone was commented on. Here was a debate where at least they seemed to show respect for each other. Did those sorts of tones come across in how they spoke? I know that J.D. Vance spoke about deporting people, which is obviously not a nice thing to say, but did he say it in a civil tone? And did Tim Walz speak in a civil tone, or were they sort of attacking each other even as they were miles away?
I would say there was a lot of attacks. It's kind of what we're used to seeing, not that much different, but it didn't seem that mean. But there were a lot of personal attacks on both sides, I would say. So they
didn't take that good vibe from the debates.
No,
the supposed good vibes. I'll say.
No, I think that especially Vance. I mean, he really, and one thing he said, he really insulted Harris's intelligence, and really went after her, and and then he spent a little bit of time going after Walz as well, but then he really focused most of his remarks on immigration, and spent most of his time talking about that particular issue, that and inflation.
Okay. Earlier this week, a couple of debates. I want to talk about the first one, the CD6 debate between Juan Ciscomani and Kirsten Engel. Caitlin, do we hear anything different than we've heard to this point, or are they basically locked in their views? And in fact, I want to ask, is it the same as it was basically in 2022? Have they changed in any way in the approach, where Ciscomani won, by about 1.5 points at that point? Is it basically the same thing for both of them?
I mean, it feels pretty similar to me. The messaging has been consistent throughout. They are attacking the same points against each other, standing firm on their own talking points. I think maybe the only thing that's different this time around is that she has much more support from the National Democratic Party than she did in the past, but that's not changing the messaging.
And it is a presidential election year, which they used to say that Democrats get better turnout in a presidential election year. But Paul, what stands out to you about this race so far?
I mean, one thing I think is really important is, there's really two central issues that I think comes to bear when you talk about Engel and Ciscomani. The first one, of course, is the border, because that is just the issue in everyone's campaigns. But, the other thing is abortion. And for Engel, abortion rights has had much more salience because of the decision from the Supreme Court. And, of course, then, Arizona having the 1864 law that could have come to bear on women, and then of course that changed. Now we have the 15-week ban. There's been a little bit of whiplash, especially for women in Arizona over the last year, about what it means for reproductive rights. So Engel has really pressed that, and it gives her, I think, some of the conversation a little more salience, because she can say, hey, this is what happens. This is what potentially could happen. And she's used that as an opportunity to attack Ciscomani pretty sharply because of his involvement in some groups, and also some of his votes, which really, it actually gives him, I think, gives her some leverage. He's pressed back against the border. If the border bill has been really important, has been talked about by all the campaigns, and she can say, well, there was a bill that was a compromise bill that might have given us some more opportunities to clamp down on the border. And not only did it didn't get a vote, it didn't even go through. It was declared dead on arrival by the Speaker of the House. So, but on the other hand, Juan's been able to come back and say, well, yeah, but I might have gone to the work on it if the bill had actually come to it, but it just wasn't popular enough to actually move through the House or the Senate.
Yeah, Chris, you spoke to both of them earlier this week. Does that ring true for you?
We did, and that's exactly what Ciscomani said, that yes, he put out statements, he didn't like the bill, but if given a chance to work on it, he would have been happy to work on it. He just didn't get that chance. And I think the one difference between 2 years ago is Ciscomani now has a record, and Engel has gone after him on some of his votes. He didn't have a record 2 years ago because he'd always been a staff member for Governor Ducey or the Arizona-Mexico Commission or groups like that. Now he has an on-the-record whole series of 2 years of votes that she goes after.
And conventional wisdom always says you want to get someone, when they have a record, early in their stage before they have a chance to really be set in Congress. Sarah, anything standing out to you about this race in particular?
Well, I did notice that he leaned a lot on his work with the Appropriations Committee, and he kept repeating that as a rebuttal against Engel's criticisms of him.
Yeah. So how important is this district, Buzz? Because even on a national level, it's one of the very few that could be considered competitive in Arizona, and we see how close the 435 is in the U.S. House. So is this race getting a lot of money? Is it generating a lot of buzz nationally? Forgive me for saying buzz again.
This is, once again, this is a national focus race because the House is so close. And if you look up at the political makeup of this district, now it was redrawn when we did redistricting, and they took out places like Douglas that we were talking about earlier and Bisbee, which tend to be more blue, and moved parts of Graham and Greenlee County in it. to give it a little more of a red shade. But if you look at the breakdown, it's only 36% Republican, and everybody else is Democrat or no party. That's not a big majority. You've got to pull people out of those other camps. And it really mirrors Arizona as a whole. Siscomani talks a lot about he is the most bipartisan member of the Arizona delegation. Yeah. We're not talking about Congress as a whole.
Is that a low bar?
It's an interesting bar when you have people like Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, and even Raul Grijalva on the other side. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I think, a bit of a reflection of his district. If he goes hard to the right, which as a Republican would be more likely than going hard to the left, or if Engel came in and went hard to the left, if she won, she alienates 2/3, or he alienates 2/3 of the voters in that district.
Yeah. Now, Caitlin, you pointed out something interesting before we started taping about, I think, the money involved in this in ads and where ads are coming up, and maybe the audience they're trying to aim for there.
Yes, definitely. Streaming services, it seems like, are a target for them. Peacock, I'm hearing, is flooded with Siscomani and Engel ads, Amazon Prime. So they seem to be reaching for that audience that isn't watching their cable-based television subscriptions, which I think, we know most people have moved towards streaming, but certainly younger voters.
Well, and streaming as well, if I'm getting this correct, I think with streaming you can't fast forward through the commercials.
You sure
but
can.
With the DVR you can, so there's a big difference there as well. Paul, any final thoughts on this race?
No, I mean, I think it is still really an important race. It's going to be really tight no matter what, and we'll have to see where it comes out.
Okay, and that district has flipped. As long as when I came here, it was Jim Colby, then a Republican, then it was Gabby Giffords, then it was Ron Barber, then Martha McSally, then Ann Kirkpatrick, and it just flips back and forth, and now Juan Siscomani. So
well, and all the people you're naming were sort of known for working with the other side, too. And I don't know, maybe Siscomani doesn't have that reputation yet. Maybe he never will. One other big debate this week, full disclosure, that I co-moderated, Ruben Gallego against Kari Lake. Chris, I'll turn to you on this one. Again, similar kind of messaging, but it was really tonally a little different. It looked like for the first few minutes, as some have commented, that Kari Lake was trying to be a little bit kinder, gentler, and then that sort of changed. And I will say this for my own benefit, that certain columnists have said, well, she ran over Gallego, then she ran over the moderators, then she ran over the format. So I guess basically the feeling was that she just sort of did whatever she wanted to do. Does that matter? Does that turn off any, as we've talked about, who's undecided at this point, but could that have hurt her by still being so aggressive?
It helped her with her base, or it kept her base solidified. I didn't see any surprises tonally out of that debate. It was exactly what I was expecting as I watched the debate. And yes, all of us around this table watch things a little differently than all of our viewers and listeners do. But I was not surprised by anything. I think if she had not used that tone, that would have been the headline of the debate. This is exactly what we were expecting from Kari Lake. So she did not disappoint in that way. Met expectations, I believe, would be, if you were doing a review, a job review, she met expectations.
Yeah, Paul, some of the commentary is, though, if she wants to gain ground on all the polling we've seen, which every poll shows her down by somewhere between 7 and 10 points to Ruben Gallego. And the feeling that, as an observer sitting at that table, that I thought was that some people said Gallego was too passive. For me, it was almost like he tried to look senatorial in some way, even though he's not a senator yet, and sort of using her aggressiveness against her. But the same issues kind of came up, border, abortion, these very important issues, but neither one of them has really changed their views on it. So in essence, a debate like this was sort of good fodder, but not much else in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of the debate is that Ruben Gallego was able to show he has experience. He's been in the room. He was in the room. He talked about when he was in the room with one of the White House officials, James Kelly, and about how he understood how a deal was put together, and then when it fell apart. And
Donald Trump's chief of staff.
Donald Trump's chief of staff, and why that particular deal fell apart. Because he was talking about the Dreamers, and that there was a deal, there was going to be a deal that the president would sign a bill that would make Dreamers, give Dreamers some kind of better protections, and in exchange for a border wall. And then that deal fell apart. And Kari Lake, blamed Democrats, and Ruben Gallego was able to say, no, we had a deal to together. It was working. It was going to happen, and then it blew up. And it blew up because of the Republicans. It blew up because of Donald Trump. And so I think he was able to show that he has some experience. He actually understands how the system works. He's been in the system. He understands how things happen. He understands how bills get made. He understands how money is moved, which I think gives him some strength in some ways, because I think one of the things Kari Lake has a lot of, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but it's not based on the realities, and I think when we talk about the border, I mean, there's a lot of hard legal realities that happen in this that people tend to ignore. They don't understand how much of this stuff is structured by law, going back to, law from 1963 to 1996 and to the modern day, and how much you can't just decide you want to do something. The Trump administration tried to do this a lot and ended up losing a lot of cases because of this. They lost in the Supreme Court, they lost in state courts and federal courts. So, there's structures I think that miss, and also miss, of course, the relationships between other countries that also really matter in how you're actually going to do things. Ruben was able to show that he understands some of those things, that he's been in the room.
Yeah. Chris, last thing on this topic, which I found interesting, that I think Kari Lake sort of warmed up when she went to the J.D. Vance event in Mesa. Ruben Gallego has voted with Biden and Harris 100% of the time, and she threw that in a couple of times during the debate. Is that something that could turn someone who's kind of on the fence, I didn't realize he was so liberal, for example?
I think, and I tried to fact check that one, and there are a lot of votes in Congress, so I couldn't fact check it. So let's go on the premise she may be right on that. But there are times I know where Gallego has crossed the aisle to make some votes on things with House members. So I don't know how much that sticks, because anymore in what we live in, this hyper-partisan world, I don't think anybody is surprised if you say a Democrat has voted with the Democratic president 100% of the time, a Republican has voted with the Republican president or governor or whatever 100% of the time. The other reality is most of the votes that come out of Congress are unanimous and bipartisan, but we only hear about the big bills, the bills to name, which a lot of happens, post office after someone who is deserving goes through with no problem. It's just the big bills we hear about, and nobody is surprised when they come down party line.
Yeah. Caitlin, for our closing topic on today's edition of the Press Room, I turn to you. Former U of A President Bobby Robbins has a new website which seems to pump up certain things and maybe leave out other information. What stood out to you about it?
Yeah, it makes no mention of the financial crisis that has certainly defined the last year.
It even mentions fundraising.
It does.
You say, he's a great fundraiser, but yeah.
Yeah, it mentions that he brought in $2.8 billion, but it fails to mention what was $240 million deficit that now has shrunk to $60. No mention of that. It touts his success as a leader, innovator, and educator, very specific areas, research. He actually takes credit for the U of A moving to the Big 12 conference, says that his influence
so the failure
made that happen.
The failure in the Pac-12, was that something he did as well? Or
no, that wasn't him. Okay. No, that was athletics. But this one was him. It was quite interesting, especially since he doesn't seem to need a job right now. He's contracted with the U of A through 2026. $750,000 a year salary, some bonuses, $10,000 a year for a car. So I'm not sure what the plan was.
But one thing that surprised me in reporting, we had Ali Wolf on a few weeks ago talking about some of this unrelated to the website, but where he indicated to another interviewer that he wants to be a college president somewhere else at some point. I suppose this website could be an advertisement in some way?
Yes. This seemed very much like a working resume. It was clear that this had been underway for quite some time. He did not make this website himself. I think my favorite section was hear from Robbins himself, and it was supposedly his journal entries, and it was two op-eds that he wrote for Business Insider about the amazing things that he did during the pandemic. So
it wasn't like finding his diary.
No, I was hoping that it would be, but it was not.
And because we are on campus here at AZPM, we're right down the way from the administration building and a couple buildings down from the president's office. We hear a lot of on-campus chatter. A lot of faculty were not terribly impressed with this website. There were a lot of things that Caitlin mentioned in her article and just mentioned here that a lot of faculty were bringing up. We'll see how it plays when he is seen around campus. But there were a lot of people who were not particularly impressed by the website, nor were they impressed that the Board of Regents and the university is continuing to pay him out. And I understand there are contractual reasons that, as Paul was saying about the border, there's a lot more that meets the eye there. But, the word on the street is a lot of people were not happy.
Caitlin, it makes me wonder what the audience for this is. I mean, is this just a person who has had some success in his career and it's sort of like an ego boost, or is this actually to try to, again, reinvent himself?
It seemed very much to me like a resume out there touting his success. The U of A has a long history of paying people to go away. That's probably something that ABOR should revisit in future contracts. But he's out there looking for a job. So now, do you have something on your calendar to say, okay, once a week I need to check the Bobby Robbins website to see what's next? Bobby Robbins Friday.
And does he go by Robert in this website, or does he go by Bobby?
He goes by Robert. Robert C. Robbins.
Okay.
And
doctor's in there as well.
It is. Yeah. He also seems to own the rights to robertcrobbins.com, but that website is not developed yet.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's some great stuff, Caitlin. Thanks for that reporting. That's all for this edition of the Press Room from the radio studios of AZPM. Our panelists today: Christopher Conover of AZPM, Sarah Lapidus of Report for America and the Arizona Republic, Caitlin Schmidt of Tucson Spotlight, Paul Ingram of the Tucson Sentinel, and I'm Steve Goldstein. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you very much for joining us on the Press Room. Next edition coming up next Friday.